When I started the Under the Pier show 20 years ago, or 2002 it was, a bit more than that, there was a gym in the main pier building, and a year or two afterwards the treadmill in the gym stopped working. Well, the computer did, and they offered me, they said, did I want the machine? Well, it was amazingly strongly made, not like treadmills now, weighed a ton, but I thought at the time it would actually make an arcade machine simply because it was so strong. And this is what it turned into. So this video is about how Rent-A-Dog was designed and built, starting from the Pier's treadmill. Well, we got the treadmill back to my workshop and hooked up the motor so it ran without the computer. And then I think I was just messing about, but I had the idea for a walking mechanism. And at its heart, it's very simple. It's just these two levers, pivoted on this end, and for this you're going to have to imagine that the bit of wood is the treadmill. So this is all the mechanism does. But if the treadmill is moving, it starts to look like walking. So, I mean, that took me half an hour or something, but it encouraged me enough to add a motor with an eccentric cam on it. So if I just hook that up, so now this will drop the what I was doing by hand. I'll just wind this back up again. So now, with a bit of luck, we should get some walking action. It's not that brilliant, but you can spend hours playing with the various timings and the different weights. So that's basically how Dottie, the dog in Rent-A-Dog, walks. I made a frame with 4 of these, and that already looked quite dog-like. Well, I was pleased with the walking mechanism, and so the machine sort of naturally became a dog walking machine. And this is the final dog, Dottie, and the mechanism is still almost identical. Yeah. So when the dog chases the cat, both the treadmill and the dog's legs speed up. So apart from the mechanisms in the dog, the only other mechanism in the whole machine is the dog lead, which has this sort of jerky motion. And that's because it's not electric, it's actually pneumatic. The dog lead is supported by a steel box section at the back. You probably saw that, so you have to imagine that this is the dog's lead. Behind the covers inside is the actual pneumatic cylinder. All it does, it just pushes the bar backwards and forwards. It's compressed air goes through either end of the cylinder. But the great thing about pneumatics is that you can completely control the speed and the force. So you control the speed with these 2 little valves on the inlet to the ends of the cylinder. So if I let more air in at this end, then you can get the jerky motion that is very hard to get with electric, and quite a force too. And the opposite, if I wind this one right back in, getting the speed back down to minimum, you can get this really gentle effect. But at the moment, there's still a lot of power in there. I can't resist it, can't hold it back with my hand. But you control the force by reducing the pressure or increasing the pressure. So in this case, if I reduce it down to, I don't know, try that. But then I can very easily just stop it moving with my hand. And of course this is useful sometimes for safety, when you don't want things to move too hard or to hurt anybody. Of course in the machine it's not a manual valve like this, it's one more like this. This is got a solenoid in there, so you send it electrical pulse and that's what activates the valve instead of my hand. Well, I like having a mixture of electric and pneumatic things in the machines. It gives it the motions more variety. The only downside is that for the pneumatic things is that you have to have a compressor, And the compressors, they're quite bulky, mostly noisy. I get the quietest one I can, but they also need maintenance and stuff. I wouldn't bother if it was just this one RAM, but because I've got a whole arcade full of machines, it's definitely well worth it. So I had the basic mechanical ingredients, but I still didn't know what the machine was about really. Just dog walking didn't seem enough. I like the machines to have a political or a satirical edge. And I struggled for ages trying to think what it could be about. I also struggled with the screens. Early on I had the idea that the dog should have its own screen so it could see what it was interested in while you saw the general view of where you're going on the walk. And I sort of got stuck thinking you couldn't watch two screens at once, and wonder what size they both should be. And anyway, I got such in a tiz that I stopped work on the whole machine for 6 months and put it to one side. Eventually, it was actually a newspaper columnist, Guy Browning, who came to have a look at it, and he immediately said, well, it's obvious. The joke is basically the difference in what you're interested about the walk and what the dog's interested. So you have the two points of view. Well, I still wasn't completely sold on the idea of just making it simple like that. But then my wife was in discussion with a car rental company. There was some mark on the car she'd rented, and so all these forms were on the table. And one morning I got into making a dog rental agreement, and somehow really enjoyed doing that. And somehow the idea of renting a dog in the same vein just took hold, and that's how the machine evolved. Well, obviously the next problem though was the animation. I made this machine 20 years ago, so digital video cameras and digital film editing, at least for consumers, was in its early days at the time. And it was all rather exciting trying things for the first time. I went down the high street photographing the buildings, not quite knowing what I'd do with the photos at first, but then had the idea of printing them out large and assembling them into sort of rather crude versions of the buildings, a side view and a front view sort of thing. And when I've got the whole high street and looked at it through the camera, I really liked the effect. I've always preferred rather wobbly animation that is sort of not too perfect, and I sort of made a sort of parallel universe which I liked. It was only later that I realised that it's very like CGI actually, that that's made up of 3D virtual models, but on each plane of the model you can put not just a colour or a texture, but you can put a JPEG image. So, and I've actually seen, I think it was in a Spider-Man film, as he flies through the air, you can very briefly see one of the buildings. It is totally flat on the surface, all the detail. So we filmed it in stop motion. The camera's quite bulky, so squeezing it into the street wasn't that easy. We moved it forward about 3 mil or 1/8 of an inch at a time, while my friend Jules moved the figures and the vehicles around. Painfully slow. I think it took us over a day to reach the marketplace. In some ways that's good. We'd almost got to the marketplace before I had the idea of the dog falling in love, and then added that to the animation. Because without that you wouldn't have the shot of the dog's bottom. But by the time we'd got to the church, I was really fed up of the fiddly business of stop motion, and so decided to do the rest of the film a rather different way. But of course at this point I should explain the cat, the orange cat. It's actually our neighbour's cat, who took to coming into the workshop and getting involved in everything. So he was around all the time, so it was obvious that he should be in the video, but also that the video should include a cat chase. So what we did for the cat chase in the end was that I just started the camera recording and moved it slowly round the landscape, stopping every now and then for my friend to move the cat to the next position. So then I simply edited out the frames that had her hand actually moving the cat. We filmed the whole thing in less than a day after a few rehearsals. It was very satisfying. And I'm amazed that it kind of works too, now I look at it again. Of course, 20 years ago, there were no flat screen tellies, so I had to have a great big cathode ray tube telly in there. So now there's actually rather little space in there, because not only was the telly, the video was actually playing off a DVD recorder off discs, and now of course it's just the two little bright sign players. On the pier it was a complete failure to start with. I thought that it would take a while for people to get used to walking on the treadmill, so I deliberately made the first scene quite boring, just walking along a side street, the first 30 seconds of the video. But what happened was that people lost interest, and then for the rest of the thing they never really regained interest. They just sort of started chatting to their friends and looking around the arcade. So after a week or so I recut the video just to remove that first scene, and the difference was quite extraordinary. People immediately hooked and engaged, and I couldn't believe what a single cut, the difference that it made to the whole experience. So then it just started to work, and it's been popular ever since. It's now been here for 20 years. I think my favourite thing about this machine is watching people when they come into the arcade with their own dog. And what I see so often is that someone will give the dog to their partner and then put the money in the machine and walk Dotty instead. No idea why they do this, but it always entertains me.